Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Supercars Exchange podcast. As always, I'm joined by Shane. How are you going?
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm going great. This weekend, actually, in a few days' time, we have our round at the OTR Super Sprint, which is at the Bend Motorsport Park. So, a very new circuit to us all. Obviously, we had the first ever round there last year. Didn't live up quite to expectations, but obviously, what happened at Baku for F1, we really have to hold out for second or third year to really judge what the circuit is like. So, what are you expecting from this weekend, Shane?
Hopefully more. It was a bit dull. It was okay. I think the excitement of a new circuit, we don't get too many of them. Usually the only new additions we see to the Supercars calendar these days are street circuits, but this was the first all-new, standard road course that we've seen for quite some time in Australia. So it was exciting to lead up to it. I think it's got a FIA grade 3. I think it is. It's one below Formula One or something like that. So it's a very high-ranking circuit as far as what they can actually host there. So it's obviously a high-quality circuit, but I think it was just a bit of a letdown because it was just a very distinct lack of overtaking. There wasn't very much of that at all, and it was dominated quite easily by one team for last year. But we've seen that plenty this year, so it's not. That's not the only reason why it wasn't overly exciting. It was just, I think the hype of a new circuit that everyone was looking forward to getting to just didn't live up to those expectations.
I think it's also the fact that there is some definitive corners around there, but it's interesting because TCR Australia posted a photo of them doing testing around there previously because they were racing then a few weekends ago. They posted a photo and one of the drivers commented, which corner is this? Because some of the corners you can't really tell, and I think that that it's kind of disengaging for the fans because you don't really know where on the circuit it is. And even with the commentary team last year, you could tell that they were struggling. Even on the Sunday, they were struggling to remember which corner was which. It was really just kind of trying to pick out the sponsorship sign so you could remember where they actually were on the circuit. But I think it will provide some more entertainment this weekend. I think it'll still be a relatively even playing field because this isn't a circuit anyone tests on because it's a bit out of the way. So it's going to be almost an even playing field again because we've had so many changes to the cars. So I don't know whether they'll really be able to use a similar setup, but really not the same setup. So I don't think we'll see the same kind of Red Bull domination. But then again, the Mustang could be pretty quick around this circuit as well.
Yeah, well, going back to what you're saying about being hard to distinguish one part of the circuit to another, I think because it is still so new, it hasn't developed that over. You expect that to develop over time. And there's no distinct landmarks that around the circuit. You got some parts of certain tracks have certain things that you see around the circuit that makes it easy to pick up in an instant where you are. Obviously you've got Maggots and Beckett's and Silverstone. You've got El Rouge through Spa. They're ones that you've only got to show that for a split second, and you will know that that's that corner.
Yeah,
it may come over time, but maybe they just need to throw in a few different things.
just a big rock in the middle or something.
Maybe, or just perhaps change the colour of the ripple strips, so at least you sort of know maybe at least what sector it's in to sort of try and round it down a little bit. But it'll come with time. But you sort of. It does, you look at some of the newer circuits in Formula One, the big Tilke circuits. You can look at a lot of those ones now, and you sort of know where you're looking at. So it'll probably come with time, but
the French Grand Prix where the drivers didn't even know where they were going.
Oh man, my God! That's such a tough track to watch racing on. Those lines. I know they've got
Sickening.
a purpose. They had the red ones are more abrasive, it slows the car down more, and then the blue ones aren't as bad. Well, I don't care about any of that. Just take away the lines because that is horrible to look at.
So sickening.
It is. It's it just almost gives you a headache trying to watch it by the end of it. And not only that, it was terrible race to watch because nothing bloody happened. So,
That's true.
If you fell asleep, before that race started, you missed nothing. So
Yeah.
that was it. But I think, this one we're 12 months on. We've seen certain teams struggle last year. Like we've seen, DJR didn't have a great time out. McLaughlin, he was 6th in race 1 last year. He was 10th in race 2. So they weren't going too well. Like strangely, the fastest Ford really over the weekend was Will Davidson. He was probably the most consistent across the all the Ford runners. So it was definitely a Holden track last year. Although we did see Nissan have a good day out, at least on the Saturday last year. So it will be hard to tell, but I think we'll still see the same usual protagonists up the front. I think the big thing that they were talking about last year was that it was tyre pressures. There was a very fine line between the teams that were going out there with the right tyre pressures had better pace early and were able to carry that through the race. And I think DJR got that wrong, and they didn't realise until after the weekend was done. And I don't know if that certain teams sort of make, or when the whispers get out of what they were running. Or maybe they hear it back through the Dunlop guys that so and so was running that over the weekend. I think it wasn't until after the weekend that they worked out why that they'll so off the pace.
Yeah.
And then also you got the sand also to compete with too. Like it's a little bit like Bahrain in that regard, where there's always a bit of sand and dust blowing around the circuit. So it's a little bit like sandpaper, I guess, in a way. Like if you start running offline, you'll start to scrape across the surface of the track. You'll understeer and oversteer a little bit, and just help to wear down those tyres. But that also it's a bit bad on one side because it means you sort of almost have a one-lane racetrack, which you definitely don't want. But also too, it punishes a mistake. If you run a little bit wide, you're going to hurt your tyres, and you might slide a little bit wider, and someone might be able to sneak through.
So you just mentioned Bahrain, and I just had flashbacks. I'm so glad that we don't go to Bahrain or Shanghai anymore, because those were incredibly boring for our series anyway. But,
Bahrain, I don't think that was... They used the shortened version of that circuit, I think, the first time they went there, and it wasn't too bad, but... it was a long way to go for not a lot to happen. If it was, if you're sort of guaranteed plenty of overtaking and it was exciting, then it would give you more incentive to want to go back.
I think supercars don't actually flag if you put up those 2 international races. They don't flag those ones, because I've seen those on YouTube all the time. Usually they flag all like if you put up the Adelaide 500 or whatever, they'll flag that, but they won't flag it if you put up the international races. But anyway, we got some very exciting news in regards to Bathurst. We got Alexander Rossi and James Hinchcliffe competing in the Bathurst 1000 as a wild card, which will be pretty awesome. But I was just looking at their announcement picture, and they've got them, I think, at the Penske office in the US, which I can assume because they've got their IndyCar trophies behind them.
It'll probably be the Andretti one.
Yeah, the Andretti office.
Yeah.
But they've got the Walkinshaw Andretti United website open up behind them, and behind them it says the Townsville Saturday wrap. So they've had this planned for a long time, obviously. But it's just interesting that they've held back on the information for such a long time, because Townsville was quite a while ago now. So that's obviously when the picture was taken and they knew it was going to happen. But yeah, very exciting news just to see another car that's going to be joining the grid. Obviously we've seen lots of international drivers come to Bathurst previously, with varying levels of experience. Usually they don't go amazingly, but a lot of them say that the supercars are the hardest cars that they've ever driven. So it'll be interesting to see how these guys perform.
Yeah, exactly. James Hinchcliffe, he has had a steer of a supercar before. I think it was back at the Gold Coast 600 when they used to have the regular drivers paired with an international driver. It was during that 2 or 3 year period. He had a turn then. I think it was with Caruso at GRM. I think it was who he was partnered with. But Rossi's never driven one before, so that'll be interesting to see. And he's got plenty of experience. He's obviously running around in IndyCar now. He's had a handful of races in F1 for one of the back market teams, but it's still he's made it to F1. That's further than what we'll ever do apart
Yeah.
from the games. But it was. I think it's exciting. I think you always like to see a few wild cards, and obviously I don't think anyone's holding expectations of them finishing on the podium or anything like that. But they'll certainly be a headache to a few drivers that will that they'll make it tough to pass. Like if they find themselves in a position to in the mid pack somewhere, then they're not going to be easy to pass.
Yeah, they don't have a championship to fight for, so.
No, that's right. So they're just going to go hell for leather, and they're just they're only in it for themselves. So it's we might even do that as a little bit of a topic for one of the podcasts leading up to Bathurst. We could do the best and worst of the international drivers, but we have seen plenty that have given it a go over time with varying levels of success. Usually on the lower end of success, they haven't always gone too well, but it's I'm looking forward to seeing them.
Really, the goal for them is probably just going to be to try and keep their nose clean most of the day and just try and be there at the end, because like it's always said, you just have to buy a ticket into the top 10 at the end of the day for that last safety car or the last 20 laps or whatever, and you're in with a good chance most of the time if you've got a pretty straight car, because obviously lots of cars get banged up throughout the day and you're just really wanting to avoid it. But obviously it's Bathurst, anything can happen, and it always does. It always does throw up interesting results anyway.
Yeah, well, you've seen, even when you think you're at a stage in the race where you think, well, surely they've got it wrapped up now, or nothing's going to change. Something happens. No one would have seen last year with David Reynolds suddenly getting cramp. Like, I've never seen anyone lose a Bathurst from cramp before.
Yeah.
But we've seen it in time and time again. As long as you don't end up in the wall, stay out of trouble, you can often sneak in a top 10 finish. So if they're able to achieve something close to top 10, then that's a victory for them, especially when they'll be in a WAU car who haven't had the most pace this year. So I think if they can qualify in the top 20, that I think that would be an excellent result for them. And then if they can finish in the top 15, I think they'd be pretty chuffed.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether they have any extra driver sessions left, so like for the co-drivers, and whether they'd even be permitted to run those guys in those sessions, considering they are a different wildcard entry. So they might only get very limited time to actually be able to experience the car, and almost might, and considering their schedules as well, they might just be Bathurst weekend is the first time they get to experience the current gen supercars.
Quite possible. I think there were. I might be wrong, but I think I've seen somewhere that there's a co-driver session this weekend, but I'm not 100% certain on that, and I haven't heard anything about them coming out for that, if there was anyway. So I think, you're right. It'll be that first practice session will be the first chance they get to drive a supercar in anger.
Be very intimidating.
Yeah, that's right. But they wouldn't be the first people to do it either. So,
yeah, exactly.
That'll be certainly a wake up call.
Previously, that obviously international drivers wouldn't have even had testing sessions or anything. It would have been okay. Time to jump in the car. Off you go up the mountain.
That's right.
So yeah. But they're professionals. They know how to deal with it. It's probably a lot more intimidating for us than it is for them.
Yeah, well, no doubt they'll be sitting on iRacing at home in their little simulator at home, and they'll be pounding around lap after lap of Bathurst in one of the supercars on the game. So they'll at least have a fair idea of what they're in for by the time they get there anyway.
I wonder if they'd share their setups. I need to set up for Bathurst.
That's it.
Richie Stenaway is going to be making his return at the Bend after he had to pull out midway through Winton with his back injury, unfortunately. Hasn't had the best year, and obviously this has put him way out of the points now because despite his car performing well whilst he has been away, those points don't count for him at all, due to how the system works. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether he is able to get back into the same level he is, or if he drops down further. Hopefully the back injury doesn't flare back up again, because obviously we don't want to see people in pain, because that's awful. But Barry Rogers, all he said was he's fine, he'll be driving at the bend. That's basically all he said. But yeah.
Yeah, well, it's certainly good for him to be fit and firing, ready to come back. It's been a few races. Like you said, I'd echo those words of you don't like to see drivers miss out on races because of an injury, especially one that they picked up many years before. That's flared back up again. We've given him a bit of a hard time lately about some of his results throughout the course of the season, and wondering whether or not he's got what it takes to cut it in supercars. But hopefully he comes back, and certainly no doubt that he's a very talented driver, and the car isn't what it probably should be this year.
Yeah,
They've certainly had cars that have been capable of putting their drivers well into the top 10, or even grabbing the odd podium here or there. But like this year, they really are one of the back market teams. Still two very inexperienced drivers, which doesn't help as well. Which one would hope that the time that we had Caruso and Chris Pither in there recently, they've had a lot more experience in supercars. One would hope that they've perhaps been able to lend their experience to the team, and they might have found a little bit of extra speed.
Yeah.
So we'll wait and see how he goes over the weekend.
It's interesting with GRM in general, as once Moffat and McLaughlin weren't in the team anymore, it just started to drop rapidly. Like, obviously McLaughlin was able to really wrangle that car, and you could tell he was when he was driving the Volvo especially. You could tell he was really pushing it hard, but it's just his feedback not there anymore. It's just plummeted downwards, and unfortunately that's it's where we're used to seeing GRM, which is really unfortunate, because we know that they're quite capable of battling for the top kind of tier of teams.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's underestimated how much Tander, losing him just recently.
Yeah, true.
They obviously had to get rid of him. He's got hundreds of races in supercar worth of experience, and you can't buy that sort of experience. Even though he probably certainly wasn't as fast as what he was 10 years ago when he won the championship, but he's obviously had a lot of time in the seat over the years. So I think that certainly hurt them a little bit. It was obviously an economic decision that they had to make, and that happens in motorsport probably too often than what we would like. But I think compared to what they were, they did have that sort of heyday back in Tander's original stint in GRM. They were quite a good team back then as well. And then when they signed with Volvo, they had quite a good run. McLaughlin was obviously getting everything out of the car. Moffat probably wasn't getting the results he probably would have liked, and you could probably put that out whether he's as good a driver as some of the others out there or anything like that. I think he's actually always been quite a good driver, just probably wasn't able to get it together as often as he would have liked, or probably should have at the same time too. But since they've switched back to the Holdens, it's been that steady decline, a little bit like what we've seen with HRT, or the old HRT, now Walkinshaw. They have had that steady descent over the past few years, and haven't found a way to stop that slide, let alone turn it around and start heading back the other way. But give it a bit of time, they might be able to do that.
Yeah. Just as you were touching on, it was interesting the way that Tander, when he initially started with GRM, there was kind of like a back market team, and then he brought them towards the front end. And then when he was with them towards the end of his career, they were kind of going back the other way again. So it's interesting the way the teams that ebb and flow, but we still keep kind of like, well, in the last 10 years or so, we've kept the same kind of teams there. Unfortunately, we have lost Stone Brothers over the years, which I think has left quite a bit of a gap, obviously, in the Ford camp. So it's obviously we've got the Mustang now, but obviously very limited amount of Mustangs. But it's becoming more team focused, I think, anyway, rather than manufacturer focused. So it's more whether you have the right team behind you, because we've seen in previous years, like last year, some of the Holden teams were really on top of it, but some of the other Holden teams were wondering where the hell their pace is at. And then it's the same with the Fords this year, where obviously DJR is right up there. The other four teams are towards the front, but they have very inconsistent weekends and just aren't up to the same pace as the Fords. So it's really shifting onto a focus of really much. You have to have a really good team behind you to try and get those results, but it's especially important to have a very good driver behind that team.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of, unfortunately, it's a little bit like Formula One now, but we're only seeing 2 or 3 teams, really towards the top, and like obviously DJR, they're like the Mercedes of supercars this year, and Ferrari you'd say that they're Red Bull. They're sort of sitting there, they're picking up all the results when DJR aren't getting them, and then I guess that probably makes the likes of Penrite and Tickford would probably be the Red Bull that they're there. If the other two fall over, then they're just sort of picking up the scraps. But clearly they're third in the queue and overall pace sort of thing. But so that's sort of what we're at, and you sort of don't want that. You want 5 or 6 teams to really be there pushing, or within at least a shot of getting a podium at every weekend. And we have had seasons like that where we've had 4, 5, 6 teams that are capable of winning races on any given weekend. But it's the sort of manner that we're seeing that gap too. Like you look at the gap between the fastest team, which at the moment's DJR. Even go back to the 5th and 6th fastest teams. There's quite a considerable gap in pace at the moment. So. Maybe the regulations next year, if they do reduce the aero, might change that. But I think it's not anything that's overly dangerous to the sport. But I think it is a bit of a shame that we have such a gap between some of the teams at the moment. But it's overall, I think Supercars is in a good spot. We're not seeing too many teams go bankrupt. We do see teams hanging around for quite a long time. Stone Brothers, they decided to sort of more fold the team themselves. It wasn't overall from lack of funding. I think if Jim and Ross wanted to keep the team going, then I think they probably would have. I think they were ready to call time and sort of pull back from racing. Yeah, I think they were getting on towards, they were getting a little bit older themselves. They'd achieved what they'd wanted to. They thought, well, we could pass this up now and pass it on to someone else that's willing to take the team forward. And that was when Betty Clemenko came along, and she started the Mercedes side of it, and then it's gone on from there. So I think it's certainly not. It wasn't so much that they went bankrupt. I think they felt like they'd achieved what they wanted to. So it's been a while since we've seen a big name team fold in supercars. If anything, DJR was probably the one closest to folding up a few years back, but then. But as Dick Johnson does better than anybody else, he finds a way to still keep the cars on the grid.
It's interesting you make that comparison about it being similar to Formula One, because I remember it would have been like 10 years ago or so. It would have been around the same time Force India was around. Because I remember Gary Rogers making the comparison about that, but obviously it was different teams at the front for F1, and they were saying if Supercars was F1, then we'd be Force India. So it's been obvious for a little while what the state of play is like, and I think that's what it is the same for a lot of motorsports, except for very new motorsport series which aren't well established. But moving on to another little bit of news. Gfinity is shutting down, basically, which is the company that runs a lot of esports series, and including the Supercars one. It's still going to run the Supercars esports series, but obviously it leaves it a bit in the dark for what's going to be happening in the future. But I think it's very unfortunate because they have run a lot of really good categories throughout the years on iRacing. So yeah, it's very unfortunate to see it shut down.
Yeah, you're right. It's I think as we've known, esports is something that's been picking up more and more over the past few years. Motorsport, I think, is one of those ones that it can be quite easy to watch because it doesn't look too dissimilar to watching the real sport on TV. Obviously, you don't have the same intensity because there's not the same consequence if there's a crash. If there's a crash, there's a risk. Like you're well and truly out of the race. And there's always that element of danger that they can hurt themselves as well, which is what part of the appeal is. We don't like to see it, but you watch it just in case it happens.
With your force feedback wheels, you could probably break your wrist with some of those ones.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you might sprain a wrist or something like that if you have the force feedback turned up too high. I think that would be about it.
Yeah, that's biggest risk.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, or maybe if you break the pedal like Max Verstappen did in that 24-hour race or something like that. There might be a sharp bit of plastic that might dig into your foot, and you might walk with a limp for a day or two. But that might be about it. But I think it is unfortunate that we're seeing Gfinity pull up stumps. It's owned by the same people that run Hoyt Cinemas, and I think that their plan was that they wanted to turn at all their cinema outlets around Australia. They wanted to use one screen within that cinema complex to hold esports events. So whether that would be changing the layout to put the little small screens down the front where the competitors would play that particular sport or game, and then it would be broadcast up onto the big screen like the movie screen, and then obviously the audience would be sitting in the regular movie seats. So I think that was probably part of the plan, which I think was probably a good way to go because that would obviously be a lot cheaper than hiring out like the big entertainment centres like Kudos Bank Arena, I think it's called, down in Sydney, and then you got the entertainment centre here in Brisbane, and I think you got Rod Laver Arena in Melbourne where they've held these large events. This would be a lot more cheaper to hold sort of more qualifying regional events.
Yeah.
But they just weren't getting the returns. I think they lost about $5.3 million so far. They've only been operating for, really only not long over a year, about 18 months ago or so. So it's been a pretty quick decline, which is unfortunate. So I think they're packing up at the end of the year. I think the Supercars eSeries will be the last one that they run, and then it's they'll be closing shop, and then that will be passed on to somebody else.
That just about wraps us up, unless we have any other ones.
I got Rubens. Yes, coming down to Australia to have a crack at the Super 5 or S5000 series, which I'll be looking forward to.
Yeah, that should be pretty good. It's good to have a pretty big name, obviously, coming down under. I saw a comment and said I think a couple of the comment was on Facebook, and it was saying I think a couple of these drivers are just looking forward to all expenses paid Australian holiday, because there's a lot of pretty big names that are coming down for it, which will be pretty exciting, which obviously makes the category a lot more competitive. Obviously those kind of drivers are used to, especially Barrichello is used to running in that kind of category, so it should be pretty cool to see that on their debut.
Yeah, I think it'll be fantastic because it's Barrichello. He was certainly one of the most popular Formula One drivers back in his day. It's obviously well known for being Schumacher's teammate, which is obviously was always going to be a tough gig. But he still managed 13 Grand Prix victories, which is a lot more than many other drivers have achieved. He got a stack of podiums, so probably he'd still be inside the top 10 easily for podiums throughout his career. At one stage, held the most races ever in Formula One.
Yeah.
So he's certainly was in the series for a long time, and He was one of my favourite drivers going around for quite a long time. Always known as one of the genuine nice guys of the Formula One paddock as well. So, looking forward to seeing him come down. I think it'll be good because it'll increase that exposure for S5000. It's its first category. I'm not too sure how many cars they're hoping to be on the grid in Sandown, which really is only a few weeks away. I think they're hoping for mid-teens. I think that's something that, at least from what I've seen of completed cars, that they've. I think it'll look like it's somewhere around that 15 mark. Hopefully more by then. To increase the exposure of the sport, I think will be very important to. Obviously there's going to be no shortage of young Australians and New Zealanders that'll be wanting to be part of the series if they've got any hopes of getting over to Europe and getting over to, and maybe one day getting into Formula One. But when one thing we've sort of lacked here in Australia is we've lacked that initial pathway. Like, we've had Formula Ford for a long time as it's been around the world, but it is really a junior category. It's one of the first steps up from go-karts. Yeah. So, and we've had Australian Formula 3 over time, but it's never really been a big category. It's never been considered one of the mainstream categories. It's even rarely ever featured on the supercars calendar alongside them. I can't remember the last time I've seen Formula 3 and supercars on the same bill. So if this is able to join in, and increases that exposure, it gives young drivers a reason to stay in Australia for a little bit longer and develop their skills before having a crack at going overseas. Because unfortunately, after the likes of Formula Ford, and we had Formula 4 for a while, but I'm not even sure if that's still going. I haven't actually noticed that this year on any of the as supports for any of the categories, but could be wrong. But usually after those first couple, your next step has to be Europe, and if you're not ready to go over there yet, you're usually back here pretty quick with your tail between your legs. But now if there's this other category that you can refine your skills for another year or two and get better as a driver, then go over to Europe, that can only be a good thing. And if you can attract that little bit more funding to help with your racing budget, that's got to be a good thing too.
Yeah, also, since Barrichello is going to obviously be over in Australia, it gives a lot of people an opportunity to get all their things signed, because a lot of F1 drivers, especially the older ones, aren't really here that much, so it gives a good opportunity for that as well, especially if you're heading over to Sandown. You'd be pretty bloody excited if you needed something signed from Barrichello.
Yeah, that's right. There would have been a few people that would have had that one hat or that one photo that they thought, I would love to get him to sign this, and then all of a sudden he's out of F1. You've lost your chance unless you went over to was it Brazilian stock cars. You won't get anything signed. So that would have been pretty difficult. So you've got a chance now, but I think we're going to see it more. I'd like to see a couple more, veteran Aussie drivers in there too. Like, I'd love to see Craig Lowndes give it a go. I don't know if that's ever been mentioned, but I reckon it would be sweet to see him in a S5000 car for a round along the way somewhere. I don't think we're going to see too many mainstream supercars drivers doing double duties. Maybe a couple towards the back. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Richie Stanaway give it a go, because he did test that car last week. I didn't see the results of how fast he was or anything like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if, for the sake of the publicity and Boost Mobile might throw him some coin to say jump in this for the weekend, and he gives it a go. That would be, I reckon that would be pretty sweet to see that too. A couple of at least the guys further down the grid might give it a go. I don't think we're not going to see a Scott McLaughlin or a Jamie Whincup or Van Gisbergen give it a go. I don't think anytime soon, just in case there's that slight chance that they hurt themselves in an accident, then they lose out on any chance of winning the Supercars championship after that. But I'm looking forward to it. That's the only thing that I'm kind of looking forward to for Sandown, because the last couple of years races haven't been the best, but certainly S5000 is going to be something to look forward to.
Finally, just before we wrap up, who's your pick for this weekend?
I think it would be hard to go past McLaughlin again. I think I think every race for the rest of the year, I think it'll be McLaughlin would be favourite, just going on what his results have been. That's certainly no guarantee that he's going to win down there. But they did struggle there a little bit last year, but it's been a whole year since then, so no doubt it'll probably change a little bit. But we've seen certainly an improvement from Triple Eight over the past couple of rounds, so I'm actually thinking that there might be a pretty good old battle between those two teams over the course of the weekend. Hopefully we'll see Coulthard bounce back. He had a pretty tough time out in Queensland Raceway. He'll be looking to bounce back, and let's face it, McLaughlin's he's still got a big lead in the championship, but he needs his teammate there to help him out a little bit too, because if they start ganging up on him too much, you start getting those 4th and 5th places, and perhaps you might even get turned around if you're trying to defend or trying to overtake, and suddenly you finish down 15th or 20th spot or something like that. There is still that chance that lead could diminish a fair bit, and then suddenly the pressure's on a bit more. So you still need your teammate up there helping you out a bit. Obviously, you still got to want to beat your teammate too, but having more friends around you is better than having none.
I think,
and also quickly on too, I think Reynolds is going to want to bounce back. He's had a couple of ordinary rounds now. Obviously, the Sunday race in Townsville, and then didn't have a great time out in Queensland Raceway either.
I think I agree with you with McLaughlin probably going to be up the front and battling with Red Bull as we've seen most of the season. But I think we'll have a surprise with Nissan, I think, because they performed well on the Saturday last year, and they haven't had too much actually changed. If anything, the rest of the cars have kind of been brought down towards them. So I think they might actually I think they might surprise us this weekend. I think maybe possibly a top 5 from one of them, not too sure, which are probably more than likely Heimgartner, I'm thinking. But I think there'll be a surprise package with the Nissans. But
yeah, very well could be. And it's always nice to see teams that aren't normally up the top grab their chances to finish up there. So I wouldn't mind seeing a Nissan or two up towards the pointy end, and even Tickford too. I'd still really like to see them win another race or two, just because I think they've shown enough pace throughout the year to earn the right for a couple of wins, but they haven't been able to just get that last bit of pace out during the race to ultimately get the top step of the podium. So I'd be and I think it would justify the dominance that the Mustang has had. Like at the moment, it's all one team and mainly one driver. If the other Ford team can grab a couple of wins, I think that would certainly be a good thing for the Ford fans that we know that we've got 2 quick teams up the front, not just sort of one and the other one's doing their best a couple of places further back. So it'd be good. I'd actually like to see a Mostert victory or 2 this weekend. That would be good.
So that just about wraps us up for today. Thank you very much for joining me, Shane.
No worries, mate, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you all very much for listening. We'll see you after the bend. Hope it's a good one, and we'll see you later.